Existence is a thing of beauty, precious, but impermanent. Life and death are mortal enemies, and yet bound to one another. The continuation of life must be protected at all costs. Some have said, my methods are brutal. To this, I say, there can be no salvation without sacrifice. We are faced with the end, and I will do what I must. Those who obsess with death, let them soon be acquainted with it.
I'm certainly not supposed to be here. How exciting.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Rogers, Game Director on Path of Exile 2, and I'm here today to talk about the Witch. Most classes have access to some kind of minion, but if you want to control an army, the Witch is probably the class you want to pick. In PoE 2, most minions don't require summoning manually. This scepter gives me a couple of free warriors, but it's also going to give me another resource called Spirit, which you can spend on whatever minions you want. You can see the Spirit bar above the mana here. On the skill screen, you can pick the composition of your army. This is a level 2 area, so I can only afford one other minion. I'll pick a sniper for now.
You can stay in the back with me.
When minions die, they'll be revived automatically so long as no other minion has died recently. So before your next battle, all your minions will come back to life. You can also order your minions around with a dedicated button. Tell them to move to a specific location, attack a specific enemy, or even open a chest or door for you.
Open that.
We also have temporary minions. This spell is called Unearth. If it kills a monster or if it hits the corpse of a monster, it creates these bone constructs. They can't take many hits and have a limited lifetime, but you can build up a real army with these. While my minions are attacking, I'm going to use some debuffs on the monsters too. The first one I'm going to use here is Contagion. If a monster dies with Contagion, it spreads to nearby enemies. Each time it spreads, the damage increases, so it's a good idea to try and keep the infection going. If any corpses are infected when you summon a minion from them, the minion will be infected as well. Each time they hit an enemy, they'll continue infecting them. It's nice to have an army of infected scorpions on your side. I also have another Chaos debuff called Essence Drain. This one does even more single target degen. If the monster is infected with Contagion at the same time, then the Essence Drain will spread as well. This can turn into a real plague of destruction. Another minion type I can summon are zombies, but they require a corpse.
These will do nicely.
They don't come back to life if they die, but they're fairly tough and can bolster your minion numbers. Many minions also have command skills. I can order my sniper to deploy a gas arrow on the battlefield to get some damage over time. Now I'm going to summon a skeletal arsonist. They can throw little fire grenades, but they also have a command skill that can detonate your own minions that are low on life. When you see the red indicator, use the skill and the minion will go boom. It's particularly nice on these bone constructs because they expire quickly anyway. So, let's take all these tools we've found and fight the boss of this area, the Carrion Crone. So, that's how many minions you can get at level 2. But let's see what minion gameplay looks like at a higher level. This is a level 30 area. I want to try a different group of minions. I still have my trusty warriors, but there's a lot of different types to choose from, like brutes for stunning or ice mages for freezing, and most of them come with their own special abilities or command skills. For now, I'd like a couple of storm mages to shock enemies, a cleric to heal and revive my minions, and a bunch of reavers as well. Reavers do high damage, and you can also enrage them before battle. This slowly kills them, but my cleric should be able to keep them alive. While my minions are attacking, I can use channeled skills like Bone Storm, which creates a devastating volley of sharp spikes. The Storm Mage has a useful ability if lots of your minions die. He can summon a lightning storm to strike the location of every dead skeleton in your army. Just like that. We also have a type of skill called Offerings. These let you impale one of your skeletons on a big spike of bone in order to buff all of your other minions. The one I've just used here is called Pain Offering. It makes all of my other minions faster and deal more damage. After the battle we have some extra corpses. We don't want those to go to waste. Profane Ritual consumes a corpse to create a power charge, which can power up some of my other spells. If I use them to summon zombies, I can create super zombies, which are more powerful. You also don't need a corpse to summon them. I can also use power charges to channel Bone Storm. If I do that, it adds a devastating AoE. In PoE 2, even non-boss monsters can be pretty devastating, like this Faradin Impaler. There's a wide variety of abilities and is pretty tough to defeat. But maybe I can put the body to a better use. This is a Bind Spectre gem. Using it, I can take the body of any enemy and capture its spirit so that I can keep it as a minion. Any monster can be captured, but the spirit cost depends on how powerful the monster is. It takes a lot of spirit for such a powerful enemy, so I'll have to unsummon a lot of my other minions, but it certainly seems like it might be worth it. If the Spectre dies, just like any other minion, it will respawn after a short time. So, I think it's time to fight the boss of this area, Tor Gull the Defiler.
You are relentless, and that makes you predictable. The end of Marraketh's tyranny is nearly at hand.
Get back in your my way.
The gods caused all this, you know. After Oriath was destroyed, I traveled, searching for answers. Everywhere I went, the same divine devastation. It must end. I will end it. And no exile will stop me! This world will be reborn, no matter the cost.
Let the hunt begin.
When we started to work on the Ranger, we knew we had to make a class with high agility. The dream of fast bow gameplay is Legolas, so that's what we wanted to deliver. The starting point is moving while shooting a bow. Any kind of basic arrow skill can be fired while moving, with a movement penalty. This immediately gives you a lot more freedom on the battlefield. Here I'm starting each battle with a poison burst arrow to poison groups of enemies, then using a lightning arrow to arc lightning around larger packs. For even more mobility, we also have a variety of skills that involve vaulting around the battlefield too. This is Frost Escape. Using it jumps backwards and shoots a freezing arrow at the ground. Really useful if monsters close on you and you need to get away. Once you've landed, if monsters were frozen, it'd be nice to have some way to take advantage of that extra time. This is where Snipe comes in. Snipe is a skill shot that you need to charge up and release at exactly the right time. If you land the right timing, Snipe is guaranteed to produce a critical strike, and does a small AoE as well, so it's a great finisher. You can also move while shooting arrow rain skills too. This skill is Lightning Rod. It shoots an arrow into the air that sticks into the ground and does a small AoE. Once the rods are in the ground though, they attract any arcs of lightning that are nearby, causing them to explode again. This means you can stack up a bunch of lightning rods on the ground and bounce lightning between them, doing way more damage. Now this takes care of packs pretty well, but for bigger enemies I'd like to have something that's going to enhance my damage output too. This skill is Stormcaller Arrow. Using it sticks an arrow into an enemy. After a short period of time, a lightning bolt comes from the sky and strikes them. This has a high chance to shock them, and shocked enemies take 30% more damage from all sources. If something big walks along, it's a good idea to throw one of these at them first to enhance your damage before following up with the other combo. Now if I really want to enhance this combo, there are a couple of things I could do using our support gem system. Skills in Path of Exile are granted by items called skill gems. Each skill gem has coloured sockets in it, and these sockets are for other items called support gems. Support gems modify your skills, and it's where a huge amount of the customization of your character comes from. First I'm going to take this multiple projectile support gem. I could add it to my lightning arrow, and it would fire multiple arrows. This would increase the number of targets I can hit, but that isn't the effect that I'm after. If I add it to my lightning rod skill instead, then when I fire it, I get a nice group of rods. This means that I don't have to spend as much time setting up before I can use it with my lightning arrow combo. I might also add faster projectiles to make the lightning rods land faster too. Now next up I'm going to grab this chain support gem. Chaining causes many effects to repeat on new targets when you hit them. If I add it to my lightning arrow, it will cause the arcs that come out of lightning arrow to strike even more targets, rippling along my line of lightning rods for huge amounts of damage. Now I think we can use support gems to improve Stormcaller arrow as well. Let's start simple. I'm going to chuck less duration on here. This will cause the lightning from the sky to strike a bit faster. Next up we have a support called Shock Proliferation. This support makes it so that any enemies shocked by the skill will also have the shock jump to nearby enemies, meaning they'll take the extra damage as well. It's just a chance to proc, so it's not going to proc on every single pack, but when it does, a pack will go down ultra quick. Another useful empowering skill is Barrage. Barrage is one of the rare cooldown skills in PoE 2. It enhances whatever your next attack is to fire 3 times. With what we have here, I think it might be a good idea to use it with Lightning Arrow. It'll generate 3 times as many lightning explosions. You could also use it at just the right moment with Snipe, or any number of other skills depending on what effect you need more of right now. It's very versatile and can be used in a range of situations. Now, even as mobile as the Ranger is, it's still very useful to slow monsters down, and a Ranger certainly has quite a few tools to do this. If you're prepared to get up close and personal, we have a skill called Electrocuting Rod. First, jump over the enemy and shoot it into them. Once the rod's in place, any lightning damage they take will build up a special electrocute gauge. Once the gauge is full, the monster is totally suppressed, allowing you to kill them easily. Now sometimes when you use Electrocuting Rod, the enemy dies before you get a chance to electrocute them. I think there's another support gem I could add to my lightning arrow to fix this problem. Neural Overload will make it easier to electrocute enemies. If the skill it's attached to puts them over 50% of their electrocute bar, it will trigger instantly. Now this skill works really well for suppressing a single large enemy, but I'd like to improve my crowd control ability for groups as well. I'm going to add a support gem called Frozen Nexus to my Frost Escape. This makes an area of chilled ground around frozen enemies. I'll also add Deep Freeze to it as well, which will make the freezes last a bit longer. Now when I use my Frost Escape on that front enemy, others nearby are slowed down. It would also be good if I had a way to slow enemies down when they're farther away from me as well. So this would be a great time to start getting into the Ranger's poison and plant-based skill set. To start with, let's have a look at Vine Arrow. This skill fires an arrow into the air that creates a small plant where it lands. The plant sends out tendrils to nearby enemies, slowing them down and poisoning them. But it does have another function too. If the plant gets further poison, it transfers that poison to the monsters it's attached to. Normally you would only be able to get 1 stack of poison on a monster at a time, but you can put as much poison as you want on this plant. You could just use the plant to slow monsters down and not worry about the poison part, but if you want to go all in on poison, this is the way to do it. Now if you do want to focus on poisons more, another useful skill is Poison Bloom Arrow. This skill creates these plant pustules on the ground. If you wait a little while, they'll explode. Just like any other plant skill, these plants respond well to poison. Shoot the Poison Burst arrow at enemies nearby and watch your plants grow more and more powerful. Poisoning the pustules causes them to do much more damage and makes them explode much faster as well. I can also add the Pierce support to Poison Burst arrow. Doing this will mean I get multiple poison bursts as it goes through each monster. We also have another skill to make a nice environment for your plants to grow. Gas Cloud Arrow. This skill shoots the ground and creates a cloud of gas that continuously poisons things inside it. throw your plants down, then put a gas cloud on top. The constant poisoning will make them grow. Another poison-related skill we have on the Ranger is called Plague Bearer. This is a reservation skill, meaning it uses spirit. When I enable it, I get this counter that counts up whenever I apply poison to a monster. You can see the counter on the skill increasing as each new monster is poisoned. Now I'm going to fight these monsters and make sure to poison them as much as I can to build up the counter. It does take quite a while to get the counter up to 100%, but it's worth it. Whenever I choose, I can unleash the poison in a big explosion around my character, dealing a large amount of damage. Now next up we have a classic, Rain of Arrows. It's simple. Shoot a bunch of arrows in the sky and they rain down for a short time. It's decent AoE and damage at long range. Now this skill doesn't last too long, but we can change that. It's time to introduce Frenzy Charges. Frenzy Charges are used for a variety of skills on the Ranger, but with Rain of Arrows they can be used to extend the duration.
You're mine.
How do we get some though? Here we have a skill called Sniper's Mark. Put it on an enemy and it will grant you a Frenzy Charge when you crit them. Now remember that snipe skill from earlier? That skill guarantees a critical hit. So first we Sniper's Marked an enemy, then we sniped them. And after that, the next Rain of Arrows will last a really, really long time. We still have some weaknesses though. While Rain of Arrows hits enemies with a ton of arrows, each one doesn't do much damage individually. It would be nice if we had a way to break the armor on enemies so that Rain of Arrows dealt more damage. Thankfully, we have this Corrode Armor support gem, and we can put it on our Gas Cloud arrow. Corrode Armor causes poison to erode the armor on targets until it's all gone. This will significantly increase the damage that Rain of Arrows does against armored targets. Oh yeah, and one more thing about gas clouds. They can be detonated with explosions. I have an explosive arrow here. Let's check it out.
Still.
Now, because monsters and gas clouds are likely to have their armor broken, I think there's another useful combo we can do. This is an Exploit Weakness support. This support provides extra bonus damage to targets that have their armor broken. Perfect for what we have going on here. So, those are just some of the skills we have on the Ranger class in Path of Exile 2. Now that we've seen all these skills, let's see how well they do against a much tougher enemy. It's time to fight the boss of the temples, Thanos.
Tava's cursed madness never ends! Orius Radiance!
One is down.
Chaotic power! Exalted are the worthy!
Stand still.
wretched are the worst. Aurea, I have found your next murderer.
Kill swiftly and move on. This is how you survive.
That's the Ranger. But oh yeah, there was one more thing. The mount. Check this out. Yes, you can ride a rower. While riding the rower, you can shoot arrows with no movement penalty. It's pretty overpowered. You can also use your vaulting skills to jump right off the rower's back. Once the rower doesn't have a rider, it starts attacking monsters, so he's nice to have around, even if you're not riding him. That said, if you are riding, don't get hit. If you take a heavy stun while on a rower, you'll fall off, and it takes a while to get up, so be careful. So that's what we wanted to show you today. Now there is just one more rather unfortunate bit of news. Path of Exile 2's beta is going to be delayed. We previously said that we would get the beta out on June 7th, and while I think we would be able to get the game's content ready in time, we underestimated how long it would take to get gameplay polished to a standard that we're happy with. We're still going to be doing alpha testing in June, but we're going to be delaying the beta until later in the year. I don't have an exact date for you today, but it should be towards the end of the year. In the meantime, you can still play Path of Exile 1, of course.
There's not a job out there I won't take, so long as the pay's good and a crossbow can solve it. I'll take them all down, one bolt at a time.
When thinking about each new class, we really try to think about how we can make combat feel different from all the others. For the mercenary, that difference is the crossbow. A crossbow is fundamentally different than a regular bow because it fires instantly instead of needing to be drawn back. This means that you need immediate feedback. Clicking the fire button should make the character shoot instantly, just like in a shooter. As soon as we experienced that, we realized that there are a lot of design lessons to learn from shooters, and so we fully embraced them. In Path of Exile 2, we have crossbows that work like sniper rifles, shotguns, and assault rifles. But in order to really get shooter-like gameplay, we wanted to go further. In Path of Exile 2, we now support WASD movement. You can now walk around in any direction independent of aiming. In fact, if this is your preferred method of gameplay, you can use it on any class, regardless of what weapon type you're using. You can change between click to move or WASD at any time. You can only hold 2 crossbows at a time, but Path of Exile 2 is all about interesting combinations of abilities, and this is where ammo skills come in. This is a burst shot crossbow, and right now I have armor piercing ammo equipped, which makes it very effective when facing a group of enemies, since it pierces right through them.
Bloody horrors!
But there are other ammos too. For a bigger single target, it might be a good idea to switch to incendiary. The more projectiles hit the target, the stronger the ignite, so you'll want to get up nice, close and personal with this one. If you have a bunch of targets running at you, you might want to slow them down. In this case, you could switch to permafrost burst shot. Shooting a bunch of smaller enemies at range will chill them, and potentially even freeze them in place. Once you have some frozen enemies though, you can switch back to armor piercing. Shooting a frozen enemy with armor piercing burst shot will explode the ice, doing a huge amount of damage to all nearby enemies. Another feature crossbows have is attachments. This is a grenade launcher. As you can see, when I equip it, it appears on the underside of the crossbow. These attachments are just like skill gems, so you effectively get extra skill slots, and you can augment these with support gems, just like regular skills.
Fire in the hole!
These grenades take a while to explode, so it's a good idea to pair them with some kind of crowd control, like permafrost burst shot. We have other grenades too though. This attachment is a flash grenade. It does barely any damage, but it does a huge amount of stun. It can be a great opener before you run into combat. Now here's another attachment, an oil grenade. Firing one of these grenades coats the ground and nearby enemies in oil. Oil slows enemies down, so it's another useful crowd control mechanic. Now, another thing that oil can do is be set on fire. Any burning enemy or explosion will ignite the oil, causing extra burning damage. One of the problems with burst shot crossbows is that each pellet doesn't do much damage individually. This means that if enemies have armor, then it will be very effective preventing that damage. But thankfully, you can equip an additional crossbow in your second weapon set to deal with the weaknesses of your primary weapon. This is a rapid shot crossbow. Rapid shot is great for closing on enemies because you can shoot while running. In Path of Exile 2, we now have the ability to allow you to use some skills while moving. Being able to create skills like this opens up a lot of new design space and allows us to really increase the pace of combat. The armor-piercing version of Rapid Shot slowly erodes a monster's armor. Once the armor is fully broken, you can easily switch back to Burst Shot to deal much more damage. Being able to run while shooting with Rapid Shot is also great for when you want to perform a fighting retreat.
Reload!
Using permafrost ammo with Rapid Shot is also useful if you need to retreat. When you shoot the ground, it creates ice crystals. If you draw monsters back over these crystals, they explode, chilling the monsters. It's great if you want to set up a safe zone before pulling the next pack. Slowing enemies down can come in handy if you want to use the incendiary version of Rapid Shot. Using this skill requires that you charge up a little bit before it fires, but as it continues to heat up, it will do more and more damage. It has a really large clip size, so you can just keep firing and firing with it. But the other really useful feature is that when the crossbow is heated up, it adds extra fire damage to any grenade that you launch. Now I've been using explosive grenades here, but it will work equally as well with flash or oil grenades too. If you use it with oil grenades, the oil will catch fire immediately. Another crossbow type that you can find is Power Shot. This one works just like a classic sniper rifle. Use it with armor-piercing ammo and it will penetrate armor on targets, so it's a good idea to use when something's really tough.
Back down or die!
Now this skill has another interesting interaction with armor break. If an enemy has its armor broken, then your Power Shot hits a weak spot and does a huge amount of single target damage, with a bunch of extra stun for good measure.
Bullseye!
Now, the incendiary version of Power Shot is more like a rocket launcher. It does a big explosive blast at a distance. One of the really useful features of this version is that you can explode any grenades that happen to be on the ground. This combo also works really well with incendiary Rapid Shot. I'm going to charge up the heat on my crossbow, shoot out a bunch of grenades, and then start the fireworks with a Power Shot. ice version of Power Shot creates frost walls at a distance. This is great for crowd-controlling monsters in tight passages. The wall segments have other uses too. If they get destroyed by monsters, then they will explode, doing a small amount of damage.
Block him in!
Now, remember that burst shot combo with frozen enemies we did earlier? That works with ice walls too. Let's put burst shot back on. Now I can fill up this area with ice walls, then shoot them with armor-piercing burst shot for a huge amount of damage. Alright, it's time to face the boss for this area. Let's see how we fare against her with all the skills I've shown you so far.
Shall take pleasure in your castration!
I'm not letting you anywhere near him.
Stay still, the mother!
No.
My dear child! Your time has come!
By the gods! Rapid fire!
Children! Eat your fill!
Take this! Piercing shot!
What have you done? Come, my children!
Freeze!
Dismember!
What is going on in this god's-forsaken city?
And that's the Mercenary. It feels totally different than anything we've made before, and Hi, I'm Jonathan Rogers, one of the game directors on Path of Exile 2. In Path of Exile 2, you can pick from one of 12 character classes. Each character has a combination of primary attributes that they focus on. Today, we'd like to show off a character who specializes in strength and intelligence, the Druid. In human form, the Druid is a spellcaster who channels the fury of nature on the battlefield, a walking natural disaster. But get up close and you'll find out why the Druid also focuses on strength. You can transform yourself into one of several wild beasts. Today we want to show off the bear form. Transformation in PoE 2 happens automatically when you use a bear attack. Use Bear Maul and your character will transform into a bear, into a meaty swing. Use a spell and your character transforms back into a human and casts it. Hitting enemies with the Bear's Maul attack will build up rage, which increases your attack damage, so your bear gets stronger with every attack. You can see the glowing runes that indicate rage on your back. Have a lot of weak enemies to take out? This is where you probably want to break out your Rampage. Let out a roar and stampede over all enemies in your path, slamming the ground with your paws. The initial roar generates rage, and then the rage is consumed as you charge along. You can use Rampage by itself to travel a short distance, or do some mauling first to build up some rage and travel a significant distance. Now, while the bear is big and strong, this isn't a pure strength class. You don't have as much armor as a warrior would have. In order to protect itself from larger packs, you might want to consider a skill like Furious Slam. This skill is all about stunning rather than damage, so it's quite useful if you're mobbed by smaller monsters and just need to get out of there. Of course, like any PoE 2 character, you can always use a dodge roll to get out of danger, since the bear is the slowest of the druid's forms. Making sure the dodge feels reliable and can get you out of any situation is paramount. When you dodge an animal form, your character instantly transforms back with no time penalty, so that you can get out of the way. You can even interrupt a mistimed transformation halfway through. Of course, doing this will mean you pay the slight time cost of having to transform back again, but it's certainly a lot better than dying. Something interesting about this skill is that it's faster to use if you're already standing up. If you're on all fours when you use Furious Slam, then the bear has to stand up first before slamming back down. But use Maul first and the bear will stand up as you swing, which has no time penalty. Then follow up with Furious Slam and your bear will quickly slam down. Much more efficient. Next up, I want to talk about Ferocious Roar. Ferocious Roar is a bear meta skill gem. It allows you to take any Warcry skill that another class like the Warrior might use and allow you to use it as a bear. I'm going to take the Seismic Cry gem and socket it into Ferocious Roar. You can actually socket more than one Warcry and use them all together, but let's just stick to one for now. Seismic Cry pushes enemies back and has some stun chance, but the reason we want to use it is for a mechanic called Exerted Attacks. If there are any heavily stunned enemies in range of the Warcry, then your next slam skill will be powered to do double the number of slams. First, I use Furious Slam to stun these enemies. Next, I follow up with Seismic Cry and get the Exerted Attack, and then I slam again. See how 2 slams triggered? So, that's all well and good, but how about we try that again using Rampage? First, get a bit of rage, slam to stun the enemies, Seismic Cry to get the exert, and then rampage around to do insane amounts of damage. So we've covered some of the bear side of the druid, but how is he as a spellcaster? Now of course we want to maximize the amount of time you spend in your animal forms, so most of the spells targeted at the druid tend to be things that last a long time or provide tactical options on the battlefield. The first and probably simplest of these is Lightning Storm. Cast it on the ground and you get an area where monsters are continuously struck by bolts of lightning. The bolts don't do much damage, but they shock monsters, which is a debuff that increases all damage on them, meaning it's a great spell to use before going in as a bear. So, that's going to increase your damage, but as I mentioned before, the bear form of the druid could use some defenses as well. The bear in particular is the slowest attacking of the druid's forms. He hits hard, but if he gets swarmed too much, it will result in your death. That's why Tornado is so useful. Tornado sucks monsters in, allowing you to split up packs and deal with groups separately, or pin monsters in place and set up combos with your other skills. The Tornado doesn't really move big monsters much, so you can actually use it to separate a boss from its minions too. The druid also has the ability to summon animal companions. This is another really useful defense because wolves can take aggro from you, keeping monsters away. In addition, the wolves howl as they are summoned, putting a temporary debuff on enemies that makes them more vulnerable to critical strikes, and giving you a reason to resummon them in combat. The last druid spell we're going to talk about today is Volcano. You can cast it quickly like this and it will spawn just a few projectiles. Or you can hold down the button to channel it for longer, which will make it fire a whole bunch of projectiles when it spawns, doing a lot more damage. The Volcano sticks around firing its little projectiles for a long time, so it's another good skill to cast before turning into a bear. Now, the reason you're going to want to turn into a bear after using Volcano is that any slam near the Volcano results in it spewing out even more projectiles. And if you thought that was a lot, then Rampage is even better, because it does 2 slams every time it hits the ground, and you can run around the volcano. Now, if you've been paying attention, you might have realized that this is going to be extra good with Seismic Cry, which we were using earlier to double the number of slams. So, first we're going to cast Volcano. Then Furious Slam till you stun something, Seismic Cry to get the double slams, then Rampage around while the Volcano spews out a stupid number of projectiles. This combo would have been even better if we'd remembered to cast our Lightning Storm first, but getting time for that seems tricky. It would also have been nice if the monsters were affected by the crit debuff that my wolves do when I first summon them. This is where some meta gems to automate some elements can come in handy. Here's a gem called Cast While Channeling. If we add Lightning Storm to the skill, we can cast it automatically while we channel a volcano as we set up our combo. Cast While Channeling is an ongoing effect, so enabling the skill will cost us Spirit, which is a new resource in PoE 2 used specifically for these kinds of skills. If you look at the top left of the screen as we channel, we can see the energy building up to cast the Lightning Storm. So long as we channel Volcano for long enough, the Lightning Storm will also be cast on the same targeted location. Currently, Cast While Channeling is active in reserving Spirit in both our human and bear forms. This means that any channeling skills we use as a bear technically will also cast the Lightning Storm. We can actually do this with Rampage right now, but it's not the best because we would prefer to stack the Lightning Storm on top of our Volcano, rather than just casting it randomly as we're rampaging around. We're also unnecessarily reserving Spirit in our bear form we could be using for something else, so let's fix that. I'm going to go into the skill options for the skill and disable it in my bear form. We showed at EXILE how you could use skill options to control which weapon set to use when casting skills, but you can also use the same interface to enable or disable which buffs you would like to have active in your different weapon sets too, without having to recast them all the time, and shapeshifting counts as a weapon set. Now when I change to a bear, the effect and the spirit reservation goes away, and when I change back to a human again, it's back automatically. So, now that we have some extra spirit available as a bear, why don't we make our life a little bit easier by automating one of our other skills? This is the Cast on Melee Stun meta gem. I'm going to put Summon Wolf in Cast on Melee Stun, so that whenever I stun a sufficient number of enemies while I'm a bear, it will summon another wolf. This is great because usually when I'm stunning, it's because I'm about to do my exerted attack slam combo. When wolves come out, they howl, adding the crit debuff to the monsters, right when I need it. It also helps keep my wolves alive and summoned at all times without me having to do it manually. So, last but not least, let's talk about the skill tree. At EXILE we showed how you could dual spec your character so that different weapons can use different passives. Well, as I said before, the bear form counts as another weapon set for specialization purposes, so he gets a tree too. If I open my passive tree, you can see how I'm near a melee damage cluster and a spell damage cluster. By holding shift, I can allocate these passives in my human form, and these ones as a bear. Now, when I change between human and bear form, my passives reallocate automatically. So, here we are at the Blind Beast. The goblins have enslaved a huge behemoth and gouged out its eyes. Now they're sending it in to fight you while they watch.
What have they done to this creature? suffering ends here. Shameful.
And there we have it. With a little bit of customization, we have a build that can combine many different active skills to do some really interesting effects. At the same time, your skill tree reconfigures automatically at the right time, and your buffs reconfigure automatically as well. You can even cast certain skills automatically. But we also haven't lost the dynamics of combat. Many skills interact with each other, and the ones you choose to use at any different moment depend a lot on what enemies you face or what situation you're in right at this moment. And at just the right time, you might be able to combine all your skills in one crazy combo, get some satisfying screen covering spam, and do some crazy damage. Now, these are just some of the skills targeted at the Druid in PoE 2. We didn't even show you the Wolf form yet. There's a lot more to play and experience, and we look forward to letting you guys try it out when we go into beta on June 7th, 2024. Welcome to Path of Exile 2. We'd like to start off by showing some of the gameplay of Act 3, one of the 6 acts in PoE 2's campaign. We're starting here in the jungle depths. Act 3 is set in the ruins of the Vaal civilization which fell thousands of years ago. Jungle has taken over their former once great cities, and we'll be exploring it using one of our 6 new character classes called the Monk. In PoE 1, we had 1 character class for each of the combinations of Strength, Dexterity, and Intelligence. When looking at the design of PoE 2 though, we realized that many of the new skills we were trying to design just didn't really fit thematically with the existing classes that we have. Being a spellcaster with a bear form makes sense for Strength Int, but it doesn't really sound like something a Templar would do. We realized that since we had new mechanics for every attribute combination, it actually made sense to design new character classes to explore the new themes. In PoE 2, every attribute combination has 2 classes associated with it. Strength Int has the Templar or the Druid. On Dexterity you have the Ranger or the more spear-focused Huntress. And on Dex Int you have the Shadow and the Monk, which Mark is playing here. The quest rewards you're offered on the 2 variants are tailored to the class. But of course, this is PoE. You can still mix and match anything to your heart's content, and they both start in the same location on the passive tree. The most important difference between the 2 is the Ascendancy classes. Each class has its own 3 Ascendancies that let you further specialize the class in a way that only that class has access to. Looks like we've come across the boss for this area. In PoE 2, every area of the campaign contains a boss of at least this difficulty. That's over 100 bosses to fight as you make your way through the campaign, and they all have unique mechanics to learn. As you've seen from watching Mark fighting, the melee combat in PoE 2 has a very different feel than before. We've done a lot of things to add mobility to combat. Practically every melee skill in PoE 2 has some kind of movement to it. The Monk in particular is a melee fighter who specializes in mobility over brute strength. So as Mark has been playing, you might have noticed these blue markers over enemies. Mark is a skill equipped called Killing Palm. Whenever an enemy has a blue indicator over it, it means the monster has low enough life to cull with Killing Palm. Using Killing Palm on an enemy will cull it, giving you a power charge. This is an important skill for the monk since many of his skills interact with power charges. One of the great things about the skill is it has a built-in dash forward, which makes it much easier to target the skill right at the point where you need it. We've done a lot of work in PoE 2 to make using skills like this feel satisfying. If you're accidentally targeting slightly off a monster, the skill will automatically lock on to a cullable target, and will even do a small amount of pathfinding around obstacles. We really want to make sure that when an opportunity to use the skill presents itself, nothing is going to get in your way. Once you've got some power charges, you need some skills to power up. A great follow-up is Falling Thunder. Falling Thunder without a power charge just creates a relatively small lightning AoE in front of you. But do it with some power charges and it turns into a pack clearer with a large number of projectiles. One thing to notice here is that, like almost every melee skill in PoE 2, Falling Thunder has a little bit of extra movement built in just in case you need it. Using the skill within range, you do a flip in place. But use it slightly further, and your character will move forward while executing it, getting you into position without any time penalty. In PoE 2, you also get a short period to redirect your target. Notice how you can start a skill facing one way, then whip the mouse sideways to land the skill in a different direction. In order to get some power charges, you're going to first need to get some lower life monsters into a cullable range. You've got a few options. If you want to charge right in, Whirling Assault is a great option. It doesn't do much damage per hit, but it covers a lot of ground. And notice how you can turn as you do it? Generally speaking, you never lose control of your character in PoE 2. If you make a turn at the right time, you can get a couple of extra hits in on the monsters, getting them in range of your cull. Follow up with a Killing Palm, then finish off the rest of the pack with your Falling Thunder. We've now entered the Vaal Mechanarium. This is the place where the Vaal built the various constructs they relied on to power their civilization.
Now this is a find! A Vaal ruin that hasn't been looted? I wonder why nobody's been in here before.
One useful feature that we've added is the ability to call in NPCs to where you are, to give you more information or help you with quest objectives, rather than having to always go back to town. In this case, we've called in Alva to find out what to do.
This mechanism, if powered with a small soul core, it could open that door. There should definitely be soul cores somewhere around here. They had to power these constructs somehow.
We'll need to go find a soul core to open this door, just like Alva said, so let's explore.
Stay back!
If you want to shave off some life without getting too close to some of the more dangerous monsters, a great option is Wind Blast. Wind Blast also doesn't do too much damage, but it keeps the enemies back. The closer they are, the farther they're pushed back, so it's a great option for keeping smaller but higher damage enemies at bay. Note that the bigger the enemy is, the less they will be pushed back, so trying to push back some giants isn't going to be as effective. And there's the soul core. Let's get back to the door.
Is sealed.
Consider me impressed. I'll keep investigating in here. Bring me in if you find anything else.
Now, if you need to defeat tougher enemies, it might be time to break out some of the monk's ice skills. Glacial Cascade creates a wave of ice that moves slowly in front of the player. It's pretty ineffective against fast-moving monsters because the damage occurs right at the end of the wave. A lot of monsters are just going to walk right by it, but if you can find a way to make a monster stop at just the right place, it can be very effective. In order to do that, you're probably going to want to be able to freeze monsters in place. The monk has a few different tools to do this. A fairly simple option is to get right in the monster's face with Ice Strike. Ice Strike doesn't do too much damage on its own, but attack 3 times in sequence and you'll get off a combo that has a much higher chance to freeze. Get in there with the freeze, then roll back and finish the job with Glacial Cascade. Remember how Glacial Cascade is that extra damaging spike at the end? If you hit frozen enemies with that spike, it shatters, dealing a large amount of damage. This is really great against bosses. And, did I just casually mention roll back? Did we forget to mention that in PoE 2 we added a dodge roll to every character? Just press spacebar at any time to roll. There's no cooldown, no limitations. It even has a bit of pathfinding to it so you don't get stuck on things. When you dodge roll, you're not invulnerable. If something hits you, you are going to feel it, but most things aren't going to hit you. And that's because while rolling, projectiles and melee strikes will always miss. You have to roll out of the way of a slam that has AoE, but anyone swinging a sword or throwing a fireball is going to miss. Another really important function of dodge roll is that it lets you cancel out of almost any skill at any time. This makes it so you don't feel like you're getting stuck doing long animations where something is about to hit you. It really changes how skills with longer attack and cast times play, and makes dodge roll a very reliable feeling way to avoid attacks. So, that's one way to get out of damage, but the monk specializes in mobility, so it makes sense that it'd have some more. Wave of Frost is one of our new attacks with a retreat built right in. You move backwards and throw out a cold attack with a significant freeze chance. A great thing about this is it puts you in a great distance to follow up with Glacial Cascade to do a whole pile of damage. Another skill you can use to get some extra freeze is Shattering Palm. Shattering Palm is a palm strike that puts a small ice bomb on the target. Killing the enemy will cause the bomb to explode, dealing some damage and a significant freeze. It's a great option against bosses where the wave of ice might not be enough to get that freeze off, but you really want to get the Glacial Cascade damage bonus.
Get back!
The final skill we're going to show you today is Flicker Strike. It's a monk skill now, and another skill that consumes power charges. If you've played PoE 1, you know what to expect. It's a great finisher for tough bosses if you're able to get some power charges beforehand.
Face your demise!
Now, in order to take down this boss, we're going to need all the tools in the monk's arsenal, especially the combo of Freeze and Glacial Cascade. If you're a PoE 1 player, you might think that you can't rely on Freeze because there's so many bosses that are immune to it, but in PoE 2, that's changing significantly. In PoE 1, Freeze is a binary mechanic. An attack freezes the target or it doesn't. What this basically means is that in PoE 1 we were forced to add freeze immunity to many bosses because Freeze just trivialized them. Because of that, freezing was something you could only really use while pack clearing, and not something you could really rely on as a core part of your build block for boss fighting. In PoE 2, all crowd control mechanics now have internal meters that allow you to build up to a freeze or stun, or whatever other CC mechanic that you're using. It's a little bit like poise from games like Elden Ring, though the meters seem to be a bit smaller. When you freeze an enemy, it increases the amount of freeze that you need to do another freeze, but the increased difficulty bleeds away slowly. More freeze will always let you freeze the boss more often, but this system means it will not get out of control in party play or interact badly with other CC mechanics, allowing us to let you use these kinds of mechanics against all bosses. Blackjaw has dropped a consumable quest item called the Flame Core. It's a permanent +10 to Spirit. In PoE 2, we really wanted to make sure that you feel rewarded for exploration. It wouldn't be much good if we made all these awesome optional bosses if we didn't have something great to find for killing them. One of the things you might find for killing a boss are permanent stat bonuses to your character.
Your end comes. Your fate is sealed.
In order to help us with the next area, we're going to call in a sorceress. Mark's friend Octavian has invited him to a party, and we're going to accept. The sorceress in town here is the new intelligence-focused character in PoE 2. While the witch focuses more on occult magic and summoning, the sorceress is themed around pure elemental destruction. Let's have a look at how she plays.
All the vaunted technology of the Val, and look where it got them. Dead and buried.
This is the largest soul core I've ever seen. With this, we could power the canal systems. But it isn't charged. There is still latent energy in this machinarium from its ancient operation. These lines in the stonework should lead to generators. You might need to find some more soul cores to spin them up, but everything looks to be in surprisingly decent condition. Maybe the golems have been maintaining it. In any case, it should still function. We'll have to remove that large core from the wall, of course, but that shouldn't be a problem.
We have some skills here that you probably recognize if you've played PoE 1 before, but they feel a bit different to play with now. Spark is great in these tight passages since it bounces around. We've added a Pierce support gem to it to allow it to really hit an entire room full of targets. For a more single target focused skill, Arc is a great choice. It does more damage to the first target you hit. If you find yourself surrounded, it might be a good idea to use Ice Nova. It hits all enemies around you and slows them down with chill. Just be careful. Getting up close and personal isn't the ideal place for a sorceress to be. He doesn't have the defenses of a more melee-oriented character. But in order to help the sorceress's weak melee defense, you could use Arctic Armor. In PoE 2, Arctic Armor is a buff that builds up as you stand still. You can see the ice crystals forming around the character. They drop off if you walk around. When monsters hit you, they take cold damage and build up to a freeze, so it's a great defense. Just be careful. You have to be standing still for a little while to get the full effect, so trying to stutter step using it isn't the best strategy. Now, Arctic Armor is an ongoing buff. Did you notice that it didn't reserve any mana? How does that work? Well, in PoE 2, we were kind of sick of the fact that basically every character was playing with no mana pool. We decided to change the way that reservation works. There is a new resource in PoE 2 called Spirit. Spirit is a dedicated resource that you can use for ongoing effects like Arctic Armor, Heralds, Auras, or even Minions. Everyone starts with 100 Spirit, which is enough for most ongoing effects. But if you want to use more than one of them, you're going to need to get some more. Spirit is available on mods from items and on the passive tree. But if you're willing to give up your offhand slot, the easiest way to get it is by holding a scepter. Find out more about that in the items talk later on. Now, if you want to increase the cold damage you're dealing, you can use Frost Bomb. It places a bomb on the ground that reduces enemies' cold resistance while it's ticking down. It's a great opportunity to use some cold skills before it explodes. And speaking of cold skills, a great skill to use on monsters with lower cold resistance is Comet. This is a new skill in PoE 2 and it hits pretty damn hard. It costs a lot of mana and has a really long cast time, but it's well worth the wait. It does a devastating amount of damage. To help get you out of danger, your character moves back slightly as it casts. It's pretty hard to hit fast-moving opponents, but it's great on tougher enemies that stand still, or even a larger pack if you're further away and can predict where they're going to move. If you run out of mana casting too many of those, then in an emergency, I guess you could use your Fireball. And this is a great opportunity to explain the way that we've changed caster weapons in PoE 2. In PoE 1, caster weapons had a default melee attack that nobody used, and because they had that, they also had a bunch of attack mods that would spawn in them, that were useless to a caster. In PoE 2 we wanted to clean all of that up, so now each staff comes with a built-in free-to-cast spell. Just put it on and spam to your heart's content. Now this particular staff is the base type that you get right at the starting beach, and it's quite likely that you're going to outgrow it, so that's why we also have a lot of staves with more utility-focused powers for casters to use. Here we have a crystal staff, and it has a pretty cool built-in spell called Unleash. Using it slams your stuff on the ground and will allow you to triple cast your next spell. Now of course you're probably going to want to use that with something powerful, and Comet is a great option. You will notice that Unleash is one of the few skills in PoE 2 with a cooldown. In general, we really try to avoid using cooldowns because we really hate the feeling that combat is just waiting to be able to use your next skill. But it does make sense for Unleash since it's free to cast and it's something you want to use situationally anyway. Now if you're really facing some tough monsters, you might want to try out Mana Tempest. Mana Tempest creates a circle of power in which you literally hover over the ground. While in the circle, your mana drains, but it powers up all your spells. Lightning projectiles fork, beams will chain further, and you also do a lot more damage. So with all of these skills, here's a great combo to try. First, cast Frost Bomb to reduce the target's cold resistance. Then use Mana Tempest to increase your damage. Follow up with Unleash, and then triple cast Comet to do a truly insane amount of damage.
I need more time.
This rare monster dropped an uncut gem. This is a great opportunity to talk about how skill gems drop in PoE 2. Instead of dropping a specific gem, you can find uncut gems. Just right click on them and pick whatever skill you want. The gem will come pre-leveled to the level of the area that dropped it, so it's a lot easier to change between skills in PoE 2. This time, I think it might be cool to grab one of our meta gems. Meta gems are skills that can have other skills socketed into them, changing how they work. In this case, we're going to select Cast on Shock. Now, let's equip this thing in the skill screen and choose a spell to trigger with it. I think Comet might be fun. Because Cast on Shock reserves Spirit, we'll need to first disable our Arctic Armor. We have to decide if we would rather have the extra defense or the extra offense of the Cast on Shock. Now in PoE 2, trigger gems use a system of filling up cast time on each trigger. Basically, if a skill has a short cast time, then it will trigger really often. And if it has a long cast time, like Comet does, it will take longer to trigger. As we use our skills on these monsters, you can see that there's a thing that's charging up on the top left corner. At 100%, the Comet comes down. So there you are, using Cast on Shock with automatically cast Comet whenever we're using our lightning skills. So, we've found the generator and the soul core. It's time to power it up. As power is restored to the Mechanarium, all the constructs are coming back to life. We need to fight them on the way back to the charged soul core. So, one thing that PoE 1 players might have noticed is that this character has both ice and lightning spells. That's pretty inefficient, isn't it? It's a big no-no for most builds because any specialization into cold or lightning isn't going to affect the other element. And generic elemental damage increases are not going to be as powerful as focusing on a single element. Well, in PoE 2, we have another major new system to introduce to solve these kinds of problems, and it starts with Weapon Swap. Now, in PoE 1, Weapon Swap isn't really used very much for its intended use case. We imagined that people were going to be swapping in and out between different weapons to deal with whatever situation they were in. People just don't do that at all, and a large reason for that is because it's really awkward. In PoE 2, we wanted to solve that. The staff Octavian is using here has an ice mod on it that makes it great for when he's using his ice spells. We would also like to be able to make sure that this build works just as well for lightning spells on the character too. If Octavian equips his previous staff in his second weapon set, you can see that it appears on the character's back. Now we're going to open up the skill screen. If Octavian opens the skill options for his lightning skills, you can see here that you can choose which weapon sets are usable with each skill. First, we uncheck set 1 from being used by his lightning skills. Then we're going to go through his cold skills one by one and turn those off with his lightning weapon. Now when we use Spark, the character will automatically switch to the lightning staff on his back and then use the skill. When Octavian uses the Ice Nova, his character will automatically switch over to the Ice Staff before using it. You can configure each skill for which set to use, or both if you don't mind which. There's a very short time penalty to switching, so it can be good to leave some skills on both sets if it doesn't matter which weapon set you're using. But we still have the problem of passives. Wouldn't it be nice if we could specialize in both cold and lightning passives on a character? Well, in PoE 2 you can. We're on the passive skill screen here, and you can see that we are close to both a cold and a lightning cluster. At the top right of the screen you can see that we have some weapon set specific points to allocate. If Octavian holds shift, he can allocate set 1 to the cold passives, and then set 2 to the lightning passives. Now check this out. As we weapon swap, our passive tree changes from one build to the other automatically. Whenever we cast the appropriate spell, the character's passives reconfigure on the fly to the correct build for that spell. Now you can't do this with every passive on your tree. Only points granted from skill books will allow this kind of dual specialization. So you can't change from a mace slamming warrior into a fire elementalist with the press of a button, but it certainly increases the number of options you have for builds. There are a huge number of places where the system can shine. You could augment your dagger shadow build with traps, or have a great curse set up on your witch in one spec and then move to your chaos debuff spells with the other. It really opens up your options. Another fun meta gem to try out is called Barrier Invocation. This works a little bit like the trigger gems I talked about before, but this one charges up as your energy shield is hit by monsters. We're going to put Ice Nova in this one. Now, the way this works is that the more shield you lose, the more charge will build up until the point that you're able to cast the skill you socketed instantly. Take some damage and then at just the right time, invoke Ice Nova to deal a massive amount of damage to all of your foes in one massive attack. If you keep losing shield, you'll keep building up even more charge, even more casts, so it's great to use in an emergency for a quick bit of defense. Here we are, back at the charged soul core. All we have to do now is take it.